With several major car makers committed to producing only electric vehicles at some point in the future, at least one market watcher sees electric cars accounting for 18% of sales by 2030. Investment capital is also pouring into battery technology. So, where will that leave the 115,000 gas stations still operating in the United States? Joining us today are Jordan Goldstein, Global Director of Design at Gensler, and Neil Brooker, Global Director of Strategic Planning and Operations at BMW DesignWorks, to discuss a collaborative study which sees gas stations as a testing ground for a new mobility and experience. Welcome to the weekly, gentlemen.
Thanks. Glad to be with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off by kind of giving a little history here. Gas stations had been closing in the U.S. even before the wave of investment in electric cars and batteries. Is that trend likely to change? And if so, to why and to what?
Sure, I could start off with that question. It's a question of purpose. The value proposition of the real estate versus the fueling. And as the fueling needs diminish, the real estate values will become a bigger driver. And as Neil and I and our respective teams have been working together on this study, we've realized that that opportunity to kind of rethink what happens at a fueling station as we have a change in mobility over time, and what does that mean for the architectural environment, just became an opportunity that was ripe for rethinking, reimagining. And Neil, I know you probably have some thoughts on this one too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, just in our capacity, we've been doing some consulting with some different fueling companies, Shell, Ionity across Europe, who are installing some of these electric charging stations. I mean, I think initially it's not driven by as Jordan is pointing out, it's not driven by the fact that it's an electrification coming into the marketplace, because we see some of these organizations are setting up effectively hybrid. They're just adding electric charging to their existing forecourts. But downstream, yeah, I mean, I think as more electric vehicles come onto the market and that becomes much bigger part of the demographic of the vehicles out there, you'll see different experiences starting to play into that. You'll be thinking about, we'll have to think about charging in a very different way to the way we think about filling up our car with gasoline. So I anticipate further change coming, but that's a little bit downstream when we see more proliferation of electric vehicles in the market.
Can you guys talk a little bit about what your vision for the gas station of the future might be, assuming, getting over some real estate humps and so forth, but what do you see these gas stations turning into?
Yeah, maybe I can start on that one. I think the gas station, we see it as an experience, right? When you're charging an electric vehicle. So fundamentally, what's changing here is we think of right now a car from going from point A to point B, and the gas station is a stop along that journey. And it's a pass-through experience, basically. You're just fueling and continuing your journey. But going forward, and this is coming both out of the work that we see in the mobility environment, as well as what we see going on in architecture. Cars themselves can become experiences, and the architecture itself can become the experience. So let's think about it. You're now getting in your vehicle. You have opportunities to charge it elsewhere. Let's not forget that. You can charge at home. You can also charge at work. But if you're on a journey,
you can charge at Walmart.
You can charge at Walmart. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but we think the part that changes here is you're fundamentally going to maybe have to, in the early days here with the battery technology, spend 30 minutes charging your vehicle at these locations. So now here's an opportunity to create more of an experience rather than just a pass-through.
Yeah, and to add to that, the boundaries that drove the layout of gas stations, that we've seen, right, in the past and certainly currently, those can now be blurred and reimagined. It's for the purposes that Neil was talking about. So, it's an opportunity to reimagine gas station sites and think more broadly about charging and refueling in a more human-centered space. And that, I think, creates an opportunity for more engaging spatial experiences. Right now, we go into a gas station and it's really a drive-through experience where you're fueling up. Maybe you run in to grab a quick snack. You may have to put air in your tires. You may have to do a quick check of something else, your windows or whatever, and then you're out. So that the architecture is really set up to move people through. And it's driven by circulation, and it's driven by the actual function of fueling up your vehicle. But imagine that changing. So as Neil was saying, with that time period, what could you actually be doing? So we started to imagine, different spatial possibilities and thinking about what does that mean for human experience. So the idea that I could relax, I could use it as focus time, I could actually mingle, have socialization, I could be part of some kind of learning, gathering, entertainment-oriented space. Maybe it's a place to pause. Maybe it's a place to actually get work done. And as Neil said, that boundary that existed, because of fuel, being noxious fumes, that I don't want to necessarily be sitting there next to that, for a long periods of time. With electrification, there's this amazing opportunity to say, well, actually that boundary is gone. The car can occupy the same space as, an office or a home and actually be an extension of that. So if we scale that up, that creates a really interesting opportunity to think, how can this location now be a benefit to daily life? And so many of these locations are at the intersection of main and main.
Yeah.
Whether that's in an urban environment or a suburban environment.
Mm-hmm. One of the big problems with adaptive reuse of gas stations has been the environmental remediation issue. And also, like as you say, sometimes they're on main and main, but it's been hard to change them into something else. Have you had the opportunity at all to test your concept anywhere? And if so, talk a little bit about some of the challenges involved in that.
Yeah, I can start this one off, and maybe Neil has some thoughts to add to it too. This is definitely a concept now, and it's been a result of this unique collaboration between, BMW DesignWorks and Gensler, to, reimagine this future and the changing mobility needs, and what does that mean for the transforming built environment around it. And we love the idea of being able to study this together, bringing architecture and mobility. So those that have the experience with, space and place, and then also, from Neil's team's perspective, those that have the experience with mobility, rather than studying these things separately, bringing them together and looking at this holistically. So we would love to find, whether that's engaging with communities, municipalities, with, public and private, to actually build, a prototype here. And it reminds me of, several years ago, when we were really looking at what does a net zero building look like. We had an opportunity with PNC to design a prototype, but then actually build it. And we built it in Florida. So it's a full net zero retail banking building. And it was a chance to not just, show concepts and have a theoretical conversation, but to actually have the building really act as a living lab that we were getting results from by the human interaction with that facility each and every day. So I think we'd really love to be able to do that as a next step. Neil, you have some thoughts to add?
Yeah, sure. I think Jordan, you picked up in your explanations on a couple of key points here, right? The purpose of the study we're doing together is not that we're the first to look at gas stations. There are others who are looking at exactly the same topic at the moment. Mm-hmm. But it's the fact that we're approaching it from both the architecture and mobility standpoint is what makes it unique, because once you integrate those two things together, you can come up with very different solutions. So that's the first point, and that's what makes this really exciting. The second point then subsequently, and Jordan mentioned it earlier, is the blurred boundaries. As we move into clean tech and as we move into clean vehicles, the boundaries between the building and the cars can change, because we're no longer worried so much about the fuel that's going into the vehicle and the fumes and everything else. So you start to think about architecture and mobility in a very different way. So now the mobility can become integrated into the solution, not just as the reason why you're there to fuel it again. So that's really exciting, and that's what's really driving a lot of what we're finding in some really interesting concepts that are coming up. I can reflect a little bit maybe from my world in automotive and mobility and say, perhaps the way to do this is we would typically go out and build a concept car to demonstrate a new technology or see how that technology resonates with the public. I would recommend that this is a fabulous opportunity for someone to come in and try to build what could be the gas station of the future. Not only does it test the opportunity, but it also is a great communication tool.
You talk about the boundaries that are kind of being pushed here. There's also a psychological boundary about, what customers expect of a gas station. The drive-through experience has been, the abiding experience for everybody to this point. And, to get them to see this as a place to work, perhaps, to interact with other people, to buy things. That's going to change. That's going to be a major change in habit and mindset. Tell me a little bit about, what needs to happen for customers to accept this type of change.
Yeah, a very good question. And I was listening to some colleagues the other day. I mean, there's three things fundamentally for the adoption of electric vehicles that needs to go on right now. You got to have push, which is governmental policies put into place that help push the vehicles into the marketplace, subsidies and so forth. Of course, you've got to have customer pull. So the vehicles themselves have to be appealing. They have to offer a different value proposition to what you can currently do with a gasoline vehicle. And then you have to have supply, and the supply is the infrastructure to enable it, and the supply of the vehicles themselves, of course. So I think that's where this is really interesting. You've got to build the right infrastructure, the right experiences to really engage the consumer and want to be part of this, and see the advantages basically of having an electric vehicle other than just a sustainable message. There's got to be a real value to it.
Yeah, and I would add to what Neil's saying too, is that to then really push the boundaries that have really defined, in a sense, the vehicle on one side and the its spatial experiences on the other. When we can start to blur those lines, I actually think that it starts to really create opportunities to reimagine the spatial experiences and the ways to engage in those spatial experiences. And we've already seen that urban experiences and behaviors are becoming more fluid. We've seen how urban cores have over the years have started to grow out, and that what was suburbia starts to become urban edge, and that gives us, I think, a chance to start to really imagine and actually redefine some of these instances. So previously, if I was fueling my vehicle and I was then going to go down the street and meet somebody for a meal, what happens if all of a sudden those things can be in the same experience, the same location? What happens if I needed to take a quick conference call? We've all seen the instances of people hopping in their car while they're fueling to continue a phone call, right?
That's right.
We've all done it. But to be able to actually say, what, I'm actually going to go and work. I'm going to actually get an hour worth of work done while I'm here. And part of that could be in my car, because my car is an extension of my office. But it could also be that by virtue of that car, that vehicle, now connecting in with a building that offers amenities that would be associated with a traditional work environment, that I can now plug in and get even more productivity done by that engagement.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for sharing a couple of minutes with us today. We're a car society that is changing, and this is going to be a topic that everybody's going to be interested in going forward.
Well, John, thanks for having us.
Yeah, John, thank you. Yeah, really exciting times.
Yeah. And thanks to our audience for watching. This is John Caulfield from Building, Design, and Construction.